I prefer to preach from down in front of the altar, but I want to make sure today that I don't stray too much from a text. You know, when you go down in front of the altar and you're kind of improvising in that way and letting the Spirit move you, sometimes you can forget important things, or you say things the wrong way. So I want to make sure I say it right. John's Gospel was written in the 90s, and this is already 60 years after Jesus rose from the dead. And during this time, Domitian is the emperor of Rome. Domitian was the worst emperor as far as Christian persecution in Christendom, really. In fact, many of the people called him Nero Redivivus, which in Latin means like Nero reincarnated or Nero back to life. Nero was one of those emperors that when they heard that he had died, they wanted to see the body, because he was so evil that they couldn't believe that he actually died. So as a result of this, Christians are self-exiling. They're all going to Asia Minor so that they can live in peace. Those who are not going to Asia Minor are they're kind of just getting comfortable with the populace. They've given up the Christian faith. They no longer want to struggle with their family at the risk of hurting them or even losing their life. And so they're beginning to compromise themselves. And in fact, even though they know the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels are widely used in liturgy at this time, and the epistles of Paul are out there, even though they know these, they're kind of being changed. They're being kind of watered down a little bit, so that Christians don't feel guilty about living in a certain way. They can live more like the pagans do. In fact, Paul will warn us about this. He talks about, in Greek, the pseudo-propheti, the false prophets. And there will be those who come with a different teaching, quoting the scriptures, but they're coming with a different teaching here. And so with all this stuff happening, also notable in the empire at the time, is that things like abortion and same-sex unions and prostitution, regardless of your age, and paganism are not only protected by the Roman Empire at this point, they are promoted by the Roman Empire. So a Roman Empire that at some points even seemed like it had a moral compass is totally devoid of any compass anymore. This is the situation in which these Christians are living. So John, writing in the 90s, wants to let them know that there is hope amidst all this stuff. I mean, they're asking the question, is Jesus coming back or not? That they're asking the question, does Jesus even care what's happening to us here? And they can't see a single glimmer of light at the end of this dark tunnel. It's not unlike the journey with the Israelites from slavery to freedom, that they would be free, but ultimately they would often succumb to the lethargy of spirit that allowed them to mix with the pagans too. That they didn't want to struggle anymore. And you could almost hear it in Joshua's voice. He's like, do you want to worship God, or do you want to worship the God of the lake and the rivers, or do you want to worship the God of the Amorites? And they say, no, we want to worship God. There's no passion there. It's almost like, just please be quiet and we will worship God. They've lost that. There's almost an indifference there. And so once again, they'll go into exile, or they'll be conquered, or God will send them the prophets. Who does God send the prophets to? He doesn't send prophets to pagans. He's not looking for conversions. Jeremiah and Ezekiel, Isaiah, all these great prophets, they went to the Israelites. In other words, these are the chosen people of God, supposed to be doing the works of God. And he's saying, you are not doing my works. You're a scandal to the people and drawing them away. And we can fall into the trap of believing that we're in a moment in the church, and trust me, it's going to get worse before it gets better, with the recent scandals, that we can say it's the worst time in the history of our world. And we can say, does Jesus even care about what's happening? And all we need to do is look in Scripture or look in our history, and we will see it was ever thus. That there, as bad as this is, there have been worse times in the history of the church. Perish the thought to think about it. And yet, the church survives, because the church itself is the truth. The opening prayer today really says it beautifully. that amidst the uncertainties of this world, there is one thing that is certain, and that is the place where we want to be one day, where we will experience this true gladness. But we need to be a people of hope. In the death camp of Auschwitz, Viktor Frankl would write in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, "It was those without anything to live for who ultimately would give up and succumb first to the trials of the camp. They had not even a glimmer of hope, and they would just give up. Why should they even go on?" These are the people of John's gospel. This is who he's writing to. People without any hope. And he's trying to give them that hope that not only will Jesus return, but Jesus is ultimately in charge. Bishop Barron is speaking about Matthew's gospel, the laborers, and he gives this example. He said it's like troops that have been fighting all night with artillery and machinery and weapons, and finally, beyond their resources, they engage even in hand-to-hand combat throughout the night, and fatigued and without any more willpower to go and ready to give up. At that moment, they hear that there are reinforcements arriving over the hill. And at that moment, they come out with a vigor and a life and a strength that they thought before was impossible. Right now, we're at a crossroads in our church. The scandals from the last few weeks have struck with ferocity our very foundations. And I haven't spoke on this really until now. I'm in an interesting situation where I'm not a pastor of a particular church right now. Thank God. I'm here. And so Father Wilkie, as the local pastor, would announce to his parish the things. And the students returning, I now feel it's time for me to kind of speak out on this. When I saw this report for the first time, and if you're from outside of the state, there was a grand jury report on the priests and clergy in Pennsylvania, which was horrible. It was terrible. And as I read this report, the words from Scripture that came to me were when Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd who lays down my life for my sheep." Not like the hired hands who will run at the first sign of danger. I know my sheep, and they know me. And he goes on later to say to his apostles, the shepherd will be struck and the sheep will scatter. And as I heard this, the first thing that I thought was, the sheep were struck and the shepherds scattered. But these were not the good shepherds who lay down their life. These were the ones who take off at the first time of danger. And I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but for many of us priests, we didn't know about this either. When we saw that report, I was horrified and shocked to see that some of these guys, I was at the funeral. I offered a blessing over them. That some of them, people might say, well, Father's long-winded, or he only talks about money, or he's aloof, or whatever else. And I say, oh, he's a good guy, just give him a chance. And some of these were not good guys. Quite to the contrary. And so, I imagine those people who heard me say those things either think I'm a fool or a liar. But I feel betrayed too. Because I didn't know. And as I said, I didn't speak out right away, primarily because when we speak from emotion, we're not rational, and that's not helpful. And having had time to pray over this and really reflect on this, it begs the question, what do we do now? Today in the gospel, this is the only place in the gospel where disciples leave Jesus over a teaching. And he has some pretty tough teachings. And these weren't just people who kind of followed, kind of gathered. These were his disciples. So he has 12 apostles, and then he has up to maybe 72 disciples. He sends them out 2 by 2. And they left him. And he says to his apostles, do you also want to leave? And I imagine they were thinking, yeah, we want to leave, pretty much. This is a difficult saying. And we didn't know it was going to be like this. But they come to believe that he has the truth. I often think about these disciples. Why were they there in the first place? But up to this point, they've only received. Jesus teaches and preaches and prophesies. He heals. He multiplies loaves and fishes. He brings people back to life. but he didn't require really anything of them yet. And today is an ultimatum. The ultimatum is, if you do not eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you do not have life within you. This is a difficult saying. That amidst all the struggles that we may encounter, that we are not following a person, but we're following God. And so they went back to their old form of life, just like they were waking up from a dream that they had the night before, as if nothing happened. And so what is our Catholic faith demanded of us at this point in our life? Jesus is demanding this of them, some of them leave. What is demanded of us? Has it made us uncomfortable? Have we had to lose sleep because we stayed up for a holy hour? Have we had to distance ourselves from certain people because they're not good for us? Have we maybe gone without something so that we could give to someone who needs more than we do? How has it made us uncomfortable? There's someone who once said, Jesus is the comfort of the afflicted and the affliction of the comfortable. So what do we do now? Because we talk about reform, and there's no question about that. We talk about people resigning, bishops, cardinals, whoever, and I'm totally on board with that. It's ridiculous it's gone as far as it has. And we talk about healing and justice, and all those things are necessary, and they will come. But what about us? We don't just wait for this to happen. We're not just going to be in a holding pattern. What can we do now? What do we do? Throughout history, those who were called to lead the people in the faith were often scandals to them. We see this throughout history, beginning long before the Catholic Church. To look up scandals in the Catholic Church throughout history is to read numerous volumes of imperfect people within a perfect church. St. Paul says it in the letter to the Ephesians today. Christ and his church cannot be separated. And he's talking about this whole marriage metaphor there. And he's saying without a spot or wrinkle that we present the church. And yet these stories from history that are littered with scandal also have another thing in common, which I hope comes to fruition in the days ahead. The stories all read the same. That in each episode where people were scandalized by those entrusted to lead them, there are lay people and priests and religious who arise to help healing and reform and renewal. And that is what we need. But quite honestly, we may be too tired for that. We get tired of the narratives and the sterile apologies that we hear. And with promises of changes to policies but not people. That we get tired of the sermons demanding more be placed in the collection each week, as opposed to talking about tithing as a lifestyle. That we're weary of defending a church riddled with corruption and unsure even among our leadership where they stand on moral issues that our church teaches definitively. And I'm with you. To wear a Roman collar now has become harder than ever before because of the evil actions it has come to represent in the public eye. And I would say we are at 40%. What does this mean? It seems that the Navy SEALs have a motto. And as they're training to be a Navy SEAL, and they're tired, and they're hungry, and they're thirsty, and they're worn out, and they've on their last nerve there, and their willpower's run out, and their mind is saying it's time to shut down, and they're ready to quit. At that moment, they tell themselves, I've only given 40% of what I have. At that moment. And this is why they become the elite, the super soldiers. Because at the moment that they want to quit, they say, I've only given 40%. And they tell their mind and their body that they're going to give more. This is not natural. This is supernatural. And I say that I'm at 40%. Now I'll admit I'm not the perfect God. I don't want to break your illusions of that. I'm not. And I'm at a point where I'm angry and I'm sad and I feel betrayed and even want to question my superiors and question my fellow priests and even question God to a certain extent. And yet I'm only at 40%. I'm tired of acting like everything is okay. I'm tired of defending. I'm tired of crying with survivors. I'm tired of, just going along like we can do this, like it'll happen automatically, and it will not. There are those days where I just want to go to the woods and stay there. But that's only 40%. It's been said that the blood of the martyrs are the seeds of the church. What this means is when the church is most persecuted, that's when we see the most saints arise. Because we're no longer comfortable. Like the Israelites, we don't fall into that apathy or that lethargy. That we see hope and we rise beyond the challenges. And these people we call saints. I was only at 40%. So what do I do now? What this has done for me, reaching beyond that 40% that I see, reaching deeper into my spiritual soul, has given me a powerful holy hour of prayer. It's made me commit to my time with God, not as an accessory if I have time. I commit that time with God, and then if I have other time, I do other things. It's inspired me to rededicate myself to the care of the Blessed Mother, and has fueled a desire to remove those things from my life which are not making me better. It's changed my conversations with people, changed how I looked at people. It's changed how I hear confessions. And yes, I am tired, but it's a good time. And I am waiting for Jesus to return to this world, but I'm waiting with hope. Because I see that glimmer of light. I know that the reinforcements are coming from beyond here, coming within this congregation as well. And a hope not for reform but renewal. A hope that you as well will reach deep into the well of your spirit to go beyond the 40%, which is necessarily going to mean a sacrifice. And say definitively and defiantly, I will not go. Where can I go? You have the words of eternal life. What Christ said is the truth. And he is the good shepherd. And he will not abandon us. The future depends on us to accept this difficult saying. And to be Catholic. That where others have failed, we will flourish. And where others speak of reform, we will proclaim renewal.